asked me to say a few words before the final piece. 40-some years ago, I think it was at Brother Chip and Kathy Baumann's wedding, we played Schubert's Ave Maria for violin and piano. Afterward, Kathy's father, Bill, came up to me with tears in his eyes. He choked up as he told me how much he adored the piece. I was flattered, but a little bit taken aback. This was not the businessman Bill Baumann that I thought I knew. I carried that moment with me through the years. Sometimes before a performance, to calm my nerves, I would look for a Bill Baumann out there in the audience, someone to remind me about my job, which is to channel the composer, to play their music with all my heart, and perhaps reach that person in the same way that Bill was touched that day. Today the job is easy. Bill is right here, all around us. There's a Bill Baumann in every seat, ripe for the picking. The next piece is a gift for you, Bill. Schubert's Ave Maria, original version, complete with soprano Jennifer Grout. Thank you for that moment 40 years ago. And if you think you like the violin arrangement, wait until you hear the German libretto.
Good morning. So fitting. We are gathered here at Chandler, one of Bill's last projects, across the street from D&K, to celebrate the life of William H. Baumann, Jr., Bill. And before we start, and as I think with you about the depth behind that word celebrate or celebration, and hear of Bill, there is a line from Psalm 127 which keeps coming back to me. Unless the Lord builds the house, their labor is in vain who build it. Drive up Vogel Lane off Fish Hill and see if that's true, as we've just been observing, and how it spreads out from there. Unless the Lord builds the house. As Bill's longtime pastor and friend, I would not be quick to say Bill Baumann was, on the surface at least, a deeply religious person. But we are not here to judge the holiness of a man, as gladly we leave such appraisal to a loving God. We are here to give thanks for him and the many gifts he shared with us, which is what true celebration is all about, through smiles and, yes, tears. There will be plenty of that, plenty of spirit in that. Their labor is in vain who build it. If there is one thing we can affirm, Bill built a lot. He was religious about his work. He built with a driving focus a spirit that spilled over on all of us, in which in celebration we are now privileged to share, and which I can attest the Lord was very much a part. We were there, for instance, to bury his father after service, so fitting at the Norwich Chapel. Then in the brand new Veterans Cemetery, the very first burial ever, where we even said special prayers to consecrate those grounds without informing the Veterans Administration. A wink between Bill and me was authorization enough. We joined to celebrate a wedding or two at St. John's, and baptisms. Talk about building in its richest priority sense. Building a family with more than a wink or two from Shirley along the way, as we have just been seeing. Then with my wife, we became pewmates with Bill at St. John's in these latter years, never far from Shirley at the organ. Oh, we sang glad songs. And yes, Bill built all right, all around this town and beyond, even in these last fitful months, as he dreamed, designed, delegated at home at Gifford, slipping as he did into other realms of consciousness. Yet always building, yes, with first and last such stunning and abiding love for Shirley and his family, which after all is the greatest construction of the heart and soul any one of us can ever achieve. And so, as we join in celebration, let us build a memorial not made of brick and stone, but of the heart, knowing that true celebration demands a resolve on all our parts to continue the work as a new community of thanksgiving and love in Bill's name. So here I invite you to do that, so with all the gusto, the regard, the respect, the love, and yes, grief that we can muster as we begin by singing All Things Bright and Beautiful. And let's fill this hall with our voices of celebration. I invite all of you to stand and sing this on the screen as you are able.
Okay, good morning. Yep, it's on. I'm glad you're here to celebrate my brother. I'm his oldest sibling, the only sister he has. We're children of the 40s. I'm going to talk about when we were kids, because most of you know him as an adult. None of you really know much about him as a child. We have two other siblings. Three of us were born in 40, 41, and 42. Our youngest brother in 49. So I had a hard time when I tried to think of things just to say about Bill. I call him Billy. He asked me to call him Bill, but I never could do that. So I've always called him Bill, or Billy rather. We were three children, basically a year apart, all the way across the border for the first three, and everything we did together, whether it was good or bad. And there were a lot of things we shouldn't have done, we did. And I'm going to start off with one of them, which I call the roof. Our youngest brother at the time was 3, Billy was 4, and I was 5. We lived up in Alberg, in the northwest corner on Lake Champlain. We used to get a lot of snow. In fact, sometimes the banks were higher than we were tall. So one day, we were outside playing, and we looked at the shed garage, I'm going to refer to it as a shed, that was behind the house. And we kept saying, wouldn't it be fun to go up on that roof and just jump off into the snowbanks? And Billy said, yeah, how are we going to do it? Well, we're too small to get the ladder out. He looked up at my bedroom window, which was facing the back of the house. He says, we could go out your window. Well, okay, it's on the second story. It was a Dutch colonial, and so the bottom of the roof below my window curved just a little bit. And he says, I'll lead the way. Beginning of leadership. Charlie, the smallest one, will be in the middle because I'm going to have to help him down off the roof to the shed roof. I says, okay. He says, your job's to close the window. And so I says, I can handle that. So we are dressed in our play clothes that we had on in the house, bib overalls, a little flannel shirt, Keds, remember Keds? Anyways, that's what we went out in, one by one. Now remember, you guys, you can hold onto the shingles if you think you're gonna fall, which we did. We traveled about 10 feet to the shed. Billy got down. He says, I'm gonna help Charlie now. And Charlie got down part way, but he wasn't tall enough to reach the roof of the shed, so Billy picked him up and set him down. And then I got down. We walked across the roof, and we said, what are we going to do now? And he said, we're going to count to 3. Charlie, you're going first. The youngest one, remember that? So Billy says, I'll count with you. 1, 2, 3, jump. I'm scared. He says, okay, I'm going to help you. And I'm on the other end watching what's going on. And he says, we're going to count again. 1, 2, 3, jump. And he pushes him. And you hear this blood-curdling scream. All of a sudden, we hear laughter. Oh, that was fun. Billy went next. Same thing, blood-curdling scream. And he laughed. He said, come on, Patty, it's your turn. And so I says, okay, I can't go back to that window because I can't open it from the outside. I have no choice. So I did the same thing, blood-curdling scream, jump. We're in snow up to our necks. And I said, anybody's feet touching the ground? And he says, no, mine don't. Charlie says, mine don't. Well, how are we going to get out of this? Billy says, we swim. And we did. And we got out, brushed each other off. And Charlie says, I think we should do it again. And so we agreed to. We ran into the house, ran up the stairs, and Mom heard us running. And what are you kids doing? Oh, we're playing chase. We get into my bedroom. We sit there for a while thinking, should we really do this again? Yes, we should. And out we went. But this time, when I closed the window, it didn't close all the way. And Mom felt the cold air downstairs, came up in the room, and she sees us out on the roof. Oh my gosh, I don't know what went through her head, but she didn't yell at us because we probably would have fallen off the big roof. She watched what we were doing. Next thing, we run in the house after repeated jumping, brushing ourselves off, because we were going to do it a third time. And we didn't do it a third time. We got our butts slapped, got a little lecture, and we had to sit in our rooms until we could think better of it. So that was our excursion. That was the first leadership that my brother took advantage of and told us what to do and how to do it. And that would continue for most of our lives as children, but that was okay because somebody needed a leader and had to lead. We also were great at running away from home. And the place we always ran to was a train station. Alberg had a major train station that did Canada, did New York, northern Vermont, and places further south. And so we always went there because there they had a box of kittens, free for the taking. And we always wanted to see, as my little brother said, the booth, which was the caboose. And the men in uniform all knew the kids in town, so we were pretty safe. We didn't feel bad about running away. And so finally one day, they took us to see the caboose. We thought we knew what the inside looked like. We were so wrong. Inside, and we had to stand on the stairs of the caboose, we couldn't go into it, were 2 sets of bunk beds and a pot-belly stove. That was it. We thought it should look like a living room, like in your own house. We were sadly mistaken. So Billy says to the man that took us to see it, because we went in the back door, well, how do they get from the main part of the train to this? Walk around holding onto the windows? And he said, no, there's another door on the front end of this. He says, I'd like to see it. He says, you can't go in. He says, I'll point it out when we walk around, which he did. And then we picked a kitten to take home. But we did that we only ran away in the summer. And we're going down the street. And back then they had party lines, and everybody in town knew the Baumann kids. So they would call my mother, ring her up. We had 2 shorts and long or something like that. Everybody waited for somebody to answer the phone, then everybody got on the phone and listened. We continued our running away ways when we moved to South Burlington, because the airport was directly across Williston Road, and we wanted to go there. So we decided we're crossing the road, going up through the little forest that they had at that time, and went into the airport. We took some of our neighbor friends with us, and we're just wandering around looking because we wanted to see the planes take off and land. You can't on the first floor. Back then, it was a small airport then. And so this guy in a uniform comes up to us and says, are you kids lost? No. What are you doing here? We want to see the planes. Oh, okay. He says, we have to go up to the 2nd floor. Now, mind you, we'd gone through the woods, mud and everything. We were pretty dirty while we got there. And all of a sudden, we all ran to the window, put our hands up in the window, noses to the window. I bet he was glad he had to clean that after. So we watched the planes come in. We didn't know how the people were going to get off the planes. Are they going to jump from that door? And he said, no, there's a stairs that's going to be moved up, which they did, and people came and went on that. So we watched several planes go and come. And finally he says to us, would you like to go up on the roof? The 3 of us looked at each other, because we know what we like to do. And so he says, you cannot go near the edge. I says, oh, he knows about us. So he took us around, pointing everything out that was on the roof. Billy was so interested in that, how things worked, what they did and everything. And the man says, well, would you like to go to my office someday and see what these things do? I'll take them apart and you can put them back together again. Billy was in 7th heaven. So we said, well, we'll come back tomorrow. And he says, I'm not working tomorrow. He says, maybe next week. And I says, okay, we'll come back next week. And we were right there. We went back there several times. But the man would take pieces apart and lay all the pieces out. And Billy watched. He says, I'd like to put it together. Now, mind you, he's 8 years old. And Billy just picked up the pieces, put them all back together. And he said to the man, does it work? And the man says it would if I hooked it up all the way. And so he says, I'd like to do that again. And so he took it apart, laid the pieces out. He says, you're really good, young man. So Billy started that interest in how things worked at a very, very young age. He liked to take things apart. About that time, the boys got erector sets. I don't know if the men here remember erector sets, but they had a motor, and with 2 sets, they could build more things. And they did, and they worked. He also got interested in doing model cars. Back then, you had to glue everything. You couldn't just snap it together. And so he'd get Charlie and myself to help him. He says, it's your job to hold the 2 pieces together so they don't move. Do you know how long it takes for glue to dry? Forever. And he says, because if it moves, I can't fit it together. So we did as we were told, and he finally had model cars. I'm going to go back to Alberg for a minute to show you how we had a very tiny mini farm then, and each of us was given a baby lamb. We had to feed that baby lamb with a bottle because it was too cold for them to go out, and then once they got outside, we used to chase them around the field. Well, it turned out the lamb that Billy had was a ram, and the horns started growing out of the head. and he taught it how to buck. But I think really that ram already knew how to buck. And the poor victim was always the youngest brother. There was a slide in the field, and we'd say, run up the slide, run up the slide. And he did, and Mom came and rescued him. We eventually moved. Well, we were in South Burlington. We were introduced to, I'm going to sit. We rode buses for the first time, which was a whole new experience because we used to walk to school in Alberg. We traded lunches. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever eaten cow's tongue sandwiches. They're great to trade. With a little mustard on. I mean, it tasted good, but you know, when you get it day after day after day or week after week, you get sick of it. And other kids had things like peanut butter, fluff nutter, and all that stuff. So we'd tell them, oh, it's a meat sandwich. And they were happy. We eventually told them it came from a cow, but that's all we told them. They didn't know, but Mom knew we traded because the bread crust that was left in our lunch boxes was not the bread that went in. The other thing that was introduced to us at that time was drop and cover. Now, most of you looking around probably had to experience that. And that was the beginning of a civil defense bomb practices in case we were attacked. I was on the 3rd floor, Billy on the 2nd floor, and Charlie on the 1st floor. And so our dad worked in civil defense, which was responsible for that. And we went home and we told him, we see no point in doing this. If there's a bomb, the building's going to implode or explode, and we're going to drop one by one by one. And we won't know where each other is. We might not even be here because they're not going to be able to identify us. And we're not going to practice anymore. Well, we had no choice because when we moved to Montpelier, we came off the 2nd floor where we had to get on the 1st floor, which was granite and brick. Thank goodness that stopped when we graduated from 8th grade. 8th grade, Billy and Charlie played Little League baseball. Billy broke his hand one summer, and he had a cast that covered him from the fingertips down to below his wrist. And he wore the cast for a couple of weeks, and then he called me and Charlie into his bedroom, which he already shared with Charlie, and he says, Charlie, get my jackknife. And we said, what are we going to do? Well, you're going to cut my cast. You're going to trim it on the side, on both sides. Well, Mom and Dad aren't going to like that. He says, don't worry, I got it figured out. He takes out of his pocket a roll of adhesive tape. You're going to tape it together. So he's never going to know. You didn't know my dad. Billy was a lot like Dad, to a certain degree. So I says, well, what are you going to do when you're eating supper and you have to have something cut? Oh, Charlie's on one side, you're on the other side, Patty. You're going to do it for me. And I'm going to keep my hand under the table. Well, he went back to baseball practice, played. He was a catcher that year. And I says, how are you going to catch the ball? He says, when you catch a ball, you give with it and put your other hand up to keep it from popping out of the glove. Already he was thinking ahead. Well, about the 6th week, Dad recognized, because Billy forgot to keep his hand under the table, that Dad saw what had happened. And Dad asked him, he says, oh, Patty and Charlie wanted to cut it off. Well, that didn't go over too well either. And Dad said, so, how's your hand? Oh, it's fine. See, I can move it, which he did. So that was the end of that, luckily. Billy was a really good athlete. A lot of people didn't know that, but he was a swimmer. He was a very good swimmer, and I don't know what the Montpelier pool is like now, but at that time it was a big oval with 2 rafts. And he also was a diver. Then they had 2 different heights of diving boards. And competition-wise, he did fine in the races. Come time for him to dive, and he'd get violently ill. The best diver on the swim team couldn't dive. So nobody really knew except for the family. Another thing, he was a junior lifesaver, and he saved somebody. A girl popped up by the raft that he was guarding from and said, my friend is having trouble. She's caught on the wire underneath the raft. Everybody knew you didn't go near that wire. It was a fence to keep you from going under. And so he drove in, freed her, breaking her bracelet, ripping the skirt on her swimsuit, got her to the surface, took her to the side, did everything a lifesaver does. A senior lifesaver was watching him all the time, said, Billy, that's a good job. You really listened well during training. And Billy says, it's all part of the job. And the senior lifesaver said, go back to your spot where you were watching. So he never mentioned it at home. And the next day, Mom took our youngest brother up to the pool. And I was there playing with Gary in the water. And the senior lifesaver came over to my mother and Mrs. Baumann. Billy tell you what happened yesterday? She says, what are you talking about? He saved somebody's life. She says, are you talking about my Billy? And he said, yes. And so he told her the whole story. Mom told Dad, and that night at supper, Dad asked him. He says, well, there was nothing that really happened that day. He says, I just did my job. And he says, well, you saved somebody's life. He says, Dad, you were a lifesaver too at one time. And you know it's all part of the job. That's what you do. So he was very humble about what he did. He never bragged about it, that I heard. He and Charlie also played football. Then Charlie was a very lightweight, so they would toss him up in the air. Billy could have been the quarterback had we stayed probably in Montpelier. He was that good and that fast. But we moved 14 miles down the road to another school district. So we finished up that year in Montpelier. In Plainfield, it was a whole different school system. There were 60 kids in the whole high school. And after you come from a class of about 100, 120 kids, it's like, wow. So the 3 of us took driver's ed my senior year because of when my birthday was. I couldn't get in Montpelier. And I said to the instructor, I do not want to drive with any of my brothers. Please don't make me. Well, yep, I did. That was scary because Billy had a slight eye problem at that time where he saw better with one eye and closer with the other eye. And so his judgment was sometimes off. He finally had that was basically corrected with glasses. In Plainfield, he met a young lady when he was 15. She was 15. He said, and he told all his friends, we were at a youth group meeting, he says, I'm going to marry that girl someday. Little did we know, he married that girl. And they were married for many, many years, happy years from what I could see. And they had a wonderful family. I have many more stories I could tell you about Billy, but I don't have the time because I don't want to hog it all. I could go on and on and on about the trouble we got into, the things we learned, and Billy was preparing eventually for what he might become because he was humble. He was interested in learning how to do things. He was helpful. Oh, I do have to tell you one more thing. When I saw the deer up there, he and Charlie got their hunting license. and Billy was standing in front of Charlie. A deer comes out of the woods. Charlie says, "Shoot, shoot, shoot." He ejected every single bullet from the rifle. And he wouldn't move. He was frozen in that spot. So Charlie never got the shot. Well, Billy eventually got a deer from the picture. So, and one more other story about Plainfield. Billy had read in a comic book, you could raise rabbits and make some money. And so Billy sent for the information. I think he had 2 females and a male. Well, you know how rabbits reproduce. So when the company contacted him, said, "We're ready to take the rabbits back." And Billy said, "What are you going to do with them?" "Well, we're going to use them for experiments." And Billy said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, some will live, some will be deformed." And Billy said, "I'm not sending them back." And Mom says, "You have to." He says, "I don't care. I'm not sending them back." He says, "They're going to get loose from the barn." And he opened the door, but he helped them get loose because he took them down where the woods were and let them all go. And from what I understand, some 65 years later, there's still some of those reproductions of bunnies that are there. So I'm glad to have this time with you. My brother was special. I have a letter from my youngest brother who couldn't be here today. Thank goodness for the light. Family, friends, and neighbors, I am very sorry I cannot be here to celebrate Bill's distinguished life, but I am recovering from a recent difficult surgery, and travel is not recommended yet. But I want every one of you to know it was my older brother, Bill, who helped me grow up. There was 8 years difference between them. You see, Bill was always there to teach me about important things like fishing, hunting, and camping, or how to clean the fish once caught. And growing up on the farm, Bill always was the older brother, demonstrating how to do things and chores right the first time. And I think his children know that. I remember Bill for having unlimited energy in school athletics and a keen love of nature. And with his strong values and community service, it was certain he would become a professional engineer legend. And I think he met that when I saw that he was recognized by the whole state. But I want this gathering of family and friends to know one other thing. You see, I would not be writing this message or even be alive today if it wasn't for my brother Bill, because I was in a catastrophic accident several years ago, which nearly ended my life. When Bill learned that I was clinging to life, he quickly assumed leadership with all matters, medical, insurance, and legal, that I simply was incapable of handling. Without Bill and Shirley's support at that time, I doubt I would have survived. Thank you, Bill, and peace be with you. I'm done.
Can you all hear me? Okay. I worked at Du Bois and King for over 40 years, starting in 1966. I worked for Bill during most of those years. And I can tell you right now, I have this feeling that he's right behind me, staring at the back of my head. I thought so. I want to relate 3 characteristics about Bill that, in my opinion, made him a success in the engineering profession. They are 1, his expectations, 2, his vision, and 3, his work ethic. In 1969, Dick DuBois and Joe King hired Bill Baumann as a project engineer. When Bill started, he hit the ground running. It was clear to me, even then, that this man was a no-nonsense type of guy and a serious engineer. I was a design technician and a surveyor at the time. I assisted project engineers in the design and plan development of various projects. One of Bill's characteristics was his high expectations. He had high expectations from those that worked for him and for the successful completion of designed projects. I recall one of my first encounters with Bill's expectations. He asked me to work on a configuration for 2 aerated lagoons to be designed and constructed against an S-shaped side slope, taking advantage of the contours in a manner that would result in a balance of cut and fill quantities. He wanted the results by the close of business the next day. Wow, I thought that was a very high expectation. I wasn't sure that I could get it done in that time frame, but I would do my best. So, not knowing how long it would take me, I decided to bring the work home and get a good start on the assignment. Back then, everything was done by hand, creating sections, calculating quantities, make layout adjustments, recreate sections, and recalculate quantities. I worked until 1 o'clock in the morning and surprised myself by completing the assignment. I presented my work to Bill at 8 o'clock the next morning. Big mistake. The high expectations that this new engineer had just got elevated to a higher level. That was certainly not my intent. From that point on, I received many assignments from Bill and knew that I had to work hard and produce results. I didn't resent the hard work or his expectations for basically 2 reasons. 1, I relished the fact that we were getting things accomplished well beyond what I could imagine. That was a good feeling. Looking back, I realized that I would not have accomplished many of those assignments if it hadn't been for Bill's high expectations. Secondly, no matter how hard I worked, Bill was working harder. I felt an obligation to a boss that worked so hard, another Bill characteristic. As time went on, I realized that I could never match his work ethic. No one worked any harder than Bill. I would often say that he was a workaholic. I'm sure he had some down times and relaxing times, but from my vantage point, it was work, work, work. Bill didn't only work hard, he was an engineering visionary. The first time I realized that was on a sewage project in the northern part of the state. A preliminary report had been completed and approved a year or 2 earlier. Bill and I made a field trip to review the project. Standing at the site, Bill said, "I don't think the town needs a pump station to pump the sewage to the treatment plant. I think we can run a sewer line from here to there, around that hill, and get the sewage to the treatment plant by gravity. The sewer might be a little deep in one area, but it could save the town the cost of constructing a pump station and the operation maintenance costs for a pump station." Even though the report had been approved by the town and state agencies, Bill had a better idea. So we performed a present cost analysis for a 20-year period, and the result was a considerable savings for the town. Bill was always looking for a better solution to engineering projects. Another example of his vision took place here in Randolph. When a fire destroyed the Baumann store in the village, Bill came up with an idea to set up a large tent on Main Street, the Ag Bag, and have the store continue serving the community from the tent, thereby contributing to the village economy. Peter Winslow, the store owner, agreed with this idea, but Bill was the driving force to make it happen. Who else would recommend shutting off Main Street and constructing this Ag Bag in the middle of the street? This was Bill's vision for solving a problem. I'll mention only one more example of his vision. We were hired to work on a development in Virgin Gorda, a British Virgin island in the Caribbean. The first order of business was to construct a road into the development property. There was no asphalt plant or concrete plant on the island. Somehow, Bill found out there were approximately a half dozen cement mixers rusting away in the jungle, vines growing up through them. There was also an old rock crusher on the site. His idea was to clean up this equipment, get it running, and utilize it to produce concrete for the road. There was plenty of loose rock that needed to be excavated for the drainage culverts and the road. We would find a cement dealer in Puerto Rico to deliver the cement, 500 to 750 bags at a time, thereby saving the markup that a supplier on the island would have charged. We would hire locals to construct the project. It worked. Again, I doubt that anyone else would have seen this possibility. Now back to his work ethic. He sent me to Virgin Gorda to supervise the road construction, and in my spare time, I was to investigate the areas where additional roads could be built for the development. He would come down about once every 6 weeks and stay for about 3 days. When he was there, day and night, we would work on water, sewer, and road designs, calculating pressures, capacities, and cost. We'd stop an hour for dinner. He would cook dinner, and we'd play a game of cribbage while dinner was cooking. After the table was cleared and the dishes washed, we went back to work and didn't stop until 10 o'clock at night, and then went to bed. Honestly, I couldn't wait for him to leave the island at those times. He wore me out. After 30 plus years of working together, we formed quite a bond, more of a professional bond, but also a friendly bond. He would bounce ideas off me and was always pleased when I agreed with him. We didn't always see eye to eye on his ideas, and he wasn't very happy when I disagreed with him. But I think he respected me for voicing my opinions, and I certainly respected him as an engineer and the man that he was. High expectations, vision, and a strong work ethic. Bill, rest in peace. You've earned it.
Hello, my name's Chris Wilson. Shirley asked me to speak today. I'm actually the artist who completed the bust of Bill. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. First of all, when he came to see me and we talked about doing this, it's just at the beginning of an undiagnosed celiac issue. So every time he'd come in to see me, he'd dump another 5 pounds. I was like, okay, well, so his weight kept dropping as we were working with him, which made it a little bit of a challenge in order to capture what we wanted to capture. But we were able to hopefully pull off a likeness, and sometimes I try to capture the energy of the person. You can judge for yourself. A few years ago, I've been sculpting for a while and I wanted to get better, so I just started grabbing people in town and doing portraits of them. And what I found is that the worst critics are generally the spouse, right? Because the spouse fell in love with somebody 40 years ago, looked very different, and that's still who they see. I wanted to, so as I started to develop this and trying to figure out how to do this, I realized you kind of have to let go of what you think you see, and you have to sculpt what you see. And it's been a wonderful application at other points in my life, is just letting go and actually seeing what you see. As a matter of fact, I have a good friend who's a sculptor, and he teaches portrait workshops around the country, and he's invited me to help him with a lot of these. So there'll be 20 people in a class, and one subject in the middle, and they'll all start to develop their pieces. And it just blows me away how different each piece looks, but they're all looking at the same thing. So I've just found that helpful to let go of that. Sorry about that. Last time I saw Bill was about 2 months ago. Actually, I saw him one other time, but about 2 months ago, I wanted to come up and I wanted to visit with him. And so I came to the house, and Shirley was there, and Bill was there, and Bill had no idea who I was, but he sure was happy to see me. And he took me around. He took me outside, and he showed me the stone wall that he had built. And he forgot the word stone, but he was very proud of that. And then we went out back, and he showed me the pond, and we walked up, and he walked me through the gardens, and he showed me the shed where he built for his tractor. And he was really proud of all of these. He forgot what all of them were called. He didn't know. He didn't have the words for them. But he still had that innate pride of accomplishment through his whole life, because that's what he did, right? He would accomplish things. He was a creator, and I love creators, don't you? I really do. So here's the thing, and here's what I see. So when I'm flying down on my bicycle down Fish Hill Road, and I look to Vogel, and I look up on the hill, I'll see Bill. When I'm standing here, I'll see Bill. I walk across the street, I'll see Bill. Go down by Freedom Foods, I'm going to see Bill there. The irony is that even when I go into Baumann and I see my friend Stephanie, and she helps me with clay stuff there, I'll see Bill. And on my way out, as I smell the cookies, I got to stop and have one at the bakery, and I'll see Bill there too. So the Bill, we're hearing a lot of different Bills, but the Bill I see was the guy who created things to allow others to create.
Shall we stand and sing together? Joyful, joyful, we adore thee.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill's grandson, Nathan. I was originally going to read a poem, but I ended up writing some things down instead. As one of his grandchildren, I'm truly honored to get to share a few words about the wonderful grandfather he was to all of us. You see, our grandfather was a man who could move mountains. Unless, of course, after farther analysis, it made more sense to dig a tunnel through them, because he could do that too. He was a brilliant engineer. He was also a master gardener, incredible chef, an expert problem solver, and an ever-loving husband to our equally as amazing grandmother. He loved to ski, to golf, to play cribbage, to host family gatherings, and to share that first slice of perfectly cooked meat and tell you it's probably terrible and that he should just throw the whole thing out. Even more than these things, I think he loved to be a grandfather and a great-grandfather. I was recently asked what my first memories of my grandfather are, and honestly, I'm not quite sure. As far back as my memory goes, he was always there. He was there for birthdays, holidays, sports games, championships, proms, graduations, weddings, you name it. Throughout our lives, he showed up and supported us all in so many ways. Sometimes it was as a cheerleader, our biggest fan. Other times it was as a mentor, offering advice, lending a tool, or financial support, but always it was as a caring grandfather and a friend. I'm unbelievably blessed and thankful to have had a grandfather as amazing as Bill in my life for 32 years, as somebody to admire and to learn from. His intelligence, his quick wit, his compassion, and his love for his family were always on full display. He also cared deeply for his community, and he showed that through his actions. He volunteered countless hours over his life and would donate an incredible amount of food from his gardens each season. I could go on and on about what a wonderful grandfather Bill was to us, but I'll close with this. He told all of his grandchildren how proud he was of us throughout his life. But Grandpa, I can tell you this, we are even more proud to be your grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Your love and support helps us smile and remember cherished experiences. I am Kathy, I am number 1, and I am Dad's oldest favorite daughter. As a family, we traverse the years of Alzheimer's and continue to create loving and new memories. We embraced our evolving Bill and Dad through the stages and progression. We planned getaways, excursions, and nightly family dinners. We laughed, we hugged, we shared experiences, and we supported one another through this journey. Dad remained a central and involved part of our experiences, whether it was dicing fruits and vegetables for dinners, weeding and planting in his prized gardens, hitting golf balls purposely over the net Bill and John set up for him, or giving his opinion on household maintenance and daily activities. He expressed his appreciation to Mom multiple times a day. We have been blessed when faced with Alzheimer's in particular. The values he instilled on us to prioritize family and teamwork, making it possible for all 6 of us, our partners and extended family members, to let Mom and Dad continue living in the house they built, surrounded with consistency and love. As many of you know, Dad approached life with qualities we associate with engineers. He had drive, focus, and a strong work ethic. This was not limited to his professional career. So Dad, we carry on many of these traditions. We clearly recognize and chuckle and somewhat commiserate with our spouses at times. The first memory I have of Dad was as a small girl, holding his hand, walking down a tree-covered sidewalks with darting squirrels in Aberdeen, Maryland, where he was stationed. Mom said he would come home, and we had a nightly routine, the start of him being my lifetime hero and protector. Once we moved to Randolph, Dad coached my brother's Little League team. Girls were not allowed yet, and made it into a family event by training me to keep the books and stats during the game. Dad would set up a smaller tan camping tent we had in our backyard for my girlfriend's sleepovers and try to scare us after dark. Growing up, Valentine's Day was a really big deal, and Dad had a special gift that he gave to Mom each time. And all of us children would sit on the bed. Why? He shared that with her and the love that went with that. As with many teenagers, I couldn't wait to leave the nest. I will never forget Dad and Mom driving away, leaving me at college in Portland, Maine, and willing myself not to run after that car. That was a life-changing moment in my real appreciation of family. Dad found my first car so I could work in college and also come home to visit. When my college tried to limit the number of classes I could take, Dad immediately met with the administration to make sure I could. When traumatic events occurred in my family, Dad always led the way to improve the situation or have a plan of attack. He pulled off miracles to make our old farmhouse handicap accessible in 3 months. After his supposed retirement, we worked side by side for several years to plan, fund, design, and build a state-of-the-art development and production facility for food and beverages. He commanded the conference room table as his office and workspace. Almost every day, he was part of our team and loved chatting with our clients and them with him. Christmas to Dad and Mom was a big deal. It was the tree we walked around forever before cutting. The Christmas cookies, the anticipation, Dad's reading of the night before Christmas, whether it was to us or the grandchildren that followed. The lights were an entire event that tried any child's patience, and Dad's with us. Ornaments were handed out one at a time. Christmas lights placement may not be hereditary, however, it is passed on, and we each have our customized approaches and timing. Dad, I'm really gonna miss stealing the first slice of turkey you carved. I'm gonna miss the colorful island camp shirts I gave you each year for Father's Day. The wilder, the better. You saw a few of them in the videos. Skiing was always a family event. John and my first pair of skis was Christmas Day on Spring Street. Dad promptly took us outside to walk around on the flat ground and then sidestep up and down the snowbanks, which were seemingly much larger back then. We would be loaded into the station wagon for a day at Pinnacle and sometimes to neighboring areas with chairlifts. With the arrival of grandchildren, Dad and Mom joined in multi-car caravans, sometimes through heavy snow, to Quebec family ski trips with shared multi-generational housing, great food, and games. Camping was an annual summertime family event, and the destinations primarily at coveted spots at Maidstone and Groton State Parks. The big blue canvas tent he meticulously arranged and assigned camping bug cots and drainage ditch around the circumference that would make any state agency proud. Cribbage, learning to shuffle cards as a yellow and blue canopy-covered picnic table, his hammock, our great canoe, and boat etiquette, the campfire breakfast, and muscatoli. Food has always been an important part of family gatherings, and camping was no exception. All meals were planned in advance and had a specific night for consumption based on the thawing cycle. Ice runs were scheduled to maintain appropriate cooler storage temperatures. Camping dinner plates and silverware were most common at meals, and sanitation was a very organized task, with Dad boiling the water and delegating the multi-stage wash, rinse, and dry cycles to Mom and the children. Inevitably, we would get back from camping and move right into overflowing gardens with produce and processing, another family event. Dad has passed on his hot pepper dill relish recipe. However, none of us have mastered his prized dill pickles yet. Dad had lists. Weeding the garden was at the top of my list. I vowed never to have a garden when I grew up. Then as soon as Chip and I have our first house, we start a garden, with Chip carrying on Dad's engineering approach in row layout and spacing, no surprise. Dad started his seeds in March and transplanted and hardened them through a series of locations throughout the house, then to the garage, then outside, and to the garden. He always had too many seedlings. Many of you have been the recipient of these plants and his prized Hubbard squash over the years. In honor of this, grandson Nathan and wife Sarah, carrying on Dad's love of earth and gardening with Hillside Botanicals, have provided potted plants that we welcome you to take when you leave and let a little love grow in your garden. Our passions became Mom and Dad's. Always on the sidelines, in the stand or the audience for a range of activities we participated in, and his grandchildren as well. His love of family, nature, community, and travel gave us a multitude of great memories. If or when we had a lapse in judgment, we were held accountable and supported by family. Our successes or accomplishments were applauded. One of Dad's last gifts to Randolph, as Mom keenly recalls, after his supposed retirement, was securing $1 million funds in CDBG to advance extension of water and sewer to the zoned industrial area on Beanville Road. He then managed in record time the first construction project for Freedom Foods to stay within the Randolph community. Everywhere the family looks, we can see examples of Dad's passions and commitment to the family he loved. I cherish every moment we spent together, and you were the best mentor and role model. We are so proud to call you Dad, and you will be with us forever. Thank you.
Good morning. I too would like to thank everyone for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill III, also known as William H. Baumann III. So that clearly makes me the favorite. From the pictures here today and some references already made, I think it's clear Dad was a skier. He had a passion for the sport that started at a young age. I'd like to share a story with you that my father told me when I was a young boy. I did have to do some fact-checking with my mom to make sure I was remembering correctly. So living in Montpelier at the time, there was this bus that would leave Montpelier on Sunday mornings and take skiers to Stowe Mountain Resort. They called it the ski bus. I believe the bus left around 6:30 in the morning. My dad's mom had one rule for him and his younger brother. Since it was Sunday, they had to go to church before they could go skiing. My father and his brother found a church that did a morning service that started at 6 in the morning and was over at 6:15. This was a Catholic church. They were Lutheran. This was found acceptable by their mother, so already, roughly at the age of 14, my dad is honing his creative problem-solving skills. This bus would get to Stowe before the lifts were even open. Apparently my dad and his younger brother, Charlie, gotten good enough with the ski patrollers and lift operators that they were allowed to do milk runs before the resort would open. A milk run consisted of getting on the single chair, and then someone would stick a crate or a box of supplies on your lap, and you'd take it to the top of the mountain for them. On a cold day, they'd give you a blanket. My dad was extremely passionate about skiing. That never changed. Like my sister recalled her and brother John's first ski lesson, it was the same for me and my little sister. Dad had us all on skis as soon as we could walk. As a family, we were lucky enough to have numerous ski days here in Vermont and vacations that would take us to Canada, Colorado, and Idaho. Somewhere along the way, conversations would lead to the thought of owning a ski condo and how great it would be. Ski in, ski out, right on the slopes. Through my father's hard work, he was able to make that dream a reality. Burke became a second home for Mom and Dad for many winters, where they enjoyed companionship of close friends and, of course, family. I will be forever grateful to my father for many things. Introducing me to the sport of skiing has had a dramatic impact on my life and lifestyle. It also helped create a bond between us that was unbreakable.
Hello. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Karen. I'm Bill's youngest, and that clearly makes me the favorite. So today we gathered to celebrate my dad. He was many things to many people. He held titles, achieved much, but to me, he was just my dad, a larger-than-life hero. He meant more to me than words can begin to express. He was a man whose presence in my life has been a constant source of love, guidance, and unwavering support. My dad taught us that family comes first, no matter what. He was dedicated and committed to spending time with us. He had high expectations that part of a family meant that everyone contributed to the work that needed to be done. This included the gardens. Planting, weeding, and harvesting might be the reason it took me 30 years to begin my own. Some of my fondest memories I shared with him took place in two especially sentimental and adventure-rich settings, Maidstone and Burke. Maidstone State Park, a place we camped each summer from as early as I can remember. As a child, I recall watching nightly cribbage games around the campfire, waiting for the time I was old enough to play my own. But until that time, I would sit next to my dad and watch. I'm not sure people would normally describe my dad as a patient man. However, I remember him wanting to take the canoe out in the evening to fish. I would always ask to go along. We would have a back and forth about how I would sit still and keep my hands out of the water so I didn't disrupt the fish. Of course, I promised I could honor our agreement, and I did try, but it was hard. That water was so smooth and it just begged for my fingers. Looking back, I am sure he knew how it was going to end every single time, but he always let me go. I was so fortunate to have Dad spend time and make memories with me, but there is nothing that compares to seeing it all come full circle and witnessing my dad create those same memories with my children. That is why Maidstone holds an extra special layer of memories. Not only did I spend my summers there, but we went on to carry the tradition when Ken and I began our own family. For many summers, we would return to Maidstone along with my parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and close friends, watching my dad make the same memories with Jake and Emma, swimming in the lake, getting tossed in the air the same way I had been, fishing Paul's Stream, making campfire popcorn, and riding bikes alongside my father are just some of the images that will warm my heart forever. We've talked about skiing being one of my dad's favorite pastimes, but it was also serious business. And if you knew my dad well, it wouldn't surprise you to know that he kept track of how many vertical feet he skied each day. Skiing was a passion that he passed on to all of us as soon as we could walk, so naturally I did the same with my own kids, which also encouraged Ken to join suit, as if my dad was going to give him a choice. My dad was with me for both Jake and Emma's very first trip to a mountain. And then, of course, Burke. Ken and I and our kids were fortunate enough to share most every ski weekend during the ski season for several years at Burke Mountain with my mom and dad, as well as family members and friends. Jake spent an enormous amount of time skiing with my dad, often catching the first and last chairs of the day. My dad enjoyed his ski days with Jake and Emma so much that despite his quest to accumulate vertical feet, only they could convince him to take an occasional run down Dashney Mile. And for those of you that don't know, Dashney Mile is a terrain park. Can you even imagine my dad in a terrain park? It was both my mom and dad who managed to get Emma to the top of the mountain, offering to ride the chair with her, telling her stories, and even singing "Here Comes the Sun" on those bluebird days. In the evening, there would be cribbage played, countless viewings of a Warren Miller film about wanting to be a ski movie star, Wii bowling, and golf. To have that time shared with both my parents was beyond precious and nothing short of incredible. I cannot recall a moment when my dad wasn't there, standing by my side, cheering me on through every triumph, and encouraging me through every challenge. I know my dad was proud of me because even when he no longer had the words, when he looked at me, his eyes smiled, I could feel his love. His love for our family knew no bounds. It was unconditional. He was our anchor. He was our hero. Thank you, Dad, for being the greatest gift of all.
I'm going to do a reading from Corinthians. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and go over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always preserves. Love never fails. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm John, Bill and Shirley's oldest son. It would appear that I may not have been the favorite, but I am going last. So what's that tell you? The reality is, as you can see here today, my father and my mother raised us in a way that made us all feel like we were uniquely special and favored with love, but never at the expense of one another. On behalf of Mom and the entire family, we want to thank everybody for the outpouring of love and support we've been receiving during these difficult times with Dad. You know, many people who knew of my father and crossed paths with him might have a hard time following some of the thoughts that I'm sharing about him, given the strong personality and demeanor that you encountered when you dealt with my father. But that's kind of why I opened with the Corinthians, because when I reflect upon my father and the fundamental core of who he was, everything that he did was driven from love and the kindness and his desire to help others and make things around him better. He pursued life with love and passion. He loved with deep and profound conviction, commitment, and intensity. He loved his chosen profession in the life of engineering. He loved his community and his country. He loved his family and friends. He loved his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And most of all, he loved his wife, his soulmate. He loved like only he knew how, and he loved like no others. My dad was an engineer. We've talked a lot about that here today. It's who he was. He was a consummate engineer who upheld his profession with the highest degree of integrity and ethics. It was in his blood and his bones, as you've heard, even from my Aunt Pat's discussions of him growing up. He received so much joy and satisfaction in building and fixing things, improving things, solving problems and providing solutions, just fundamentally helping others and the society and community around him. Dad was a leader with vision who could see things and possibilities that others couldn't. He was a man of action indeed. He was a force of energy that helped get things done in a time of need, whether it was associated with building positive things for the community's youth recreational programs, or important community infrastructures involved with the rebuilding and the reinvestments of the downtown district and the local economy. You know, Mom and Dad never intended on settling in Randolph, but the community caught their attention when they were passing through Vermont, intending on returning to Vermont. And it's pretty much been a history and an investment of love into this community ever since. It's perhaps one of my father's greatest final lessons to me is the reinforcement and the importance of the investment of love into one's community, as I witness how this community has responded and supported our family with all the love and kindness it has during our most difficult times. You know, Dad was my father. He was my first true and original hero in life. Fathers can be everything in the eyes of their children. They're almost superhuman strength with capabilities to make everything in a child's life okay. A father's love is special and like no other. Dad and I had a pretty special and unique relationship. You know, I've been blessed with having the greatest dad possible who was actively part of his children's lives, supporting them and loving them, and having the ability to know my father as the great dad he was, as most children do growing up. But I also got to learn and know my father as a professional and the professional engineer that he was, the businessman and the leader that he was. And having that opportunity later in life was a blessing that not all children get, to be able to learn and understand their parents the way that I was by working with Dad side by side all those years. You know, it's always interesting when you're a kid growing up and you talk about your parents and what they do, and you say, oh, you know, he works at Du Bois and King or he's an engineer, but you don't really know what those words mean. And I didn't really truly understand it until I was really there at Du Bois and King working with my father and really truly understanding what it was that he did as an engineer. And it kind of all made things come together for me. Love can be expressed in many ways, shapes, and forms. Sometimes love can be misunderstood or even disguised and undercover. Children often have a difficult time understanding and appreciating their parents' life until later in life. My siblings and I like to reminisce, and we've been doing a lot of that lately, about the various ways our father showed his love for us. We sometimes didn't see it or understanding at the time, but we now reflect back upon those memories and can only smile at how much Dad must have loved us when he had the lawnmower running outside our bedroom windows, you know, early Saturday morning as our wake-up reveille call to start our weekend chores and fulfill our responsibilities. And it didn't really matter how late said teenager may have been out the Friday night before. You know, we didn't really appreciate that at the time. We didn't see the love then. But now we see it and are thankful for it. His dad developed and instilled a strong sense of responsibility and that work ethic that we've talked about here that serves us all well later in life. And we didn't appreciate it then, but we look back on it a little differently now. It wasn't always easy to see that love, but it was always there without question. We knew that. The love could often have a bigger purpose or lesson behind it. Dad was a hard-working individual regardless of the endeavor. But he took his recreational interests in life with just as much dedication and passion as well. Dad enjoyed sharing and teaching those recreational interests and experiences with us, playing with us just as hard as he was teaching us how to work. Dad loved his wife, his high school sweetheart, his soulmate. The love, honor, and respect that my father demonstrated and showed that he has for Mom has taught me my greatest lessons in life about love. I witnessed firsthand as a child growing up just how strong his love was and that his wife and family was everything. If there was one thing we knew growing up, we knew that we were family and that we took care of one another no matter what. Nothing else mattered or got in the way. Family always came first. Nothing can break that bond of love. Dad's illness was a cruel and devastating one, where the brain and the mind become so damaged that the individual and the person who they were become lost over time in a haze of confusion and memory loss. The disease takes so much when it takes one's mind, particularly when the individual was a person of intellect, drive, and action. The disease took so much of my father from us over the final years with its greedy progression, to the point where some loved one, or even us children, at times, weren't recognizable or known. The one thing that insidious disease could not take from my father was his love for his wife, for my mother. No matter what happened to my father in his mind, no matter how confused or angry or agitated he became, the one thing that could not be conquered by that disease was my father's love for my mother. It was one of the most beautiful and magical experiences I'll ever witness, seeing the strength of my parents' love when put to the ultimate test of for better or worse. Thank you, Dad.
Now I know what celebration means. Thank you all. After my commendation, our commendation, and our final hymn, the family will be led out, and then all of us will be welcome to join them upstairs in the Estermesh room. Over many years, and for many funerals, at St. John's, when the service had ended, Shirley at the organ would break out with this Easter hymn. I will read the words of its first verse here in commendation for Bill. The strife is o'er, the battle done, the victory of life is won. The song of triumph has begun. Alleluia. And now, on behalf of all of us, this prayer of commendation, and I invite you, if you are able, to stand with me. As I say for all of us, into your hands, O merciful Savior, we commend your servant William. Acknowledge, we humbly beseech you, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, a sinner of your own redeeming. Receive him into the arms of your mercy, into the blessed rest of everlasting peace, and into the glorious company of the saints in light. Amen. Alleluia. Let us sing together for the beauty of the earth.
From reality